For my money, one of the weirdest stories anywhere in the New Testament is found in Mark 8. Jesus encounters a man who is blind, and he ostensibly wants to heal him, but he does that using his spit. What on earth is going on with this story? And what are the antecedent tales that might help us make sense of what's going on here in Mark?
We can admit this, right? This is a pretty weird story. Jesus takes the man away from town, spits on his eyes, heals him a little bit, and then heals him the rest of the way. So let's talk about these ideas here. First, I think the fact that Jesus takes this man away from town, away from prying eyes, pun intended, into a space where only his disciples get to see what's happening, I think that only reinforces that this story is a continuation of the last story. All through Mark, we've seen this messianic secret. It's very common for Jesus not to want the recipients of his grace to tell his story ahead of his pace. But nowhere does he go this far to actually take the person away from town to heal them. I think that's meant to be there because this moment is personal. It's personal for this man. It's personal for his closest friends who get to observe what happens. As an aside here, remember this. Sometimes your best stories are just for you. Or maybe just you and some of your closest friends. Perhaps everything doesn't need to be on Insta after all. It's okay. Which may ironically also be our entry point into our second question about this story. Why on earth does Jesus spit on this man? Well, as strange as it sounds, this is actually a somewhat familiar ritual in the ancient world. Eye salves containing spit were actually a pretty common story. There's this really interesting mention in the book of Revelation where the Spirit writes to the church in Laodicea. Now, in the city of Laodicea, there were three major industries. There was a robust banking sector. There was a lucrative trade in wool that came from a particular black sheep that was cultivated in the region. And there was an ancient ophthalmology school that specialized in this particular Phrygian powder that they used to make a soothing eye salve that was put on eyes. And so, in Revelation, when the Spirit writes and says, I counsel you to buy gold from me refined in the fire, rather than your banks, and to wear white clothes to cover your nakedness, rather than the expensive black wool that you covet, and to put my salve on your eyes so that you can see, rather than trust your fancy powder, this is a uniquely Laodicean panacea. But it's also an example of this type of salvific, very much pun intended, by the way, expectation around the healing of eyes. Because you would buy this powder and you would mix it with some type of liquid or lubricant, let's be honest here, probably water, not spit, and you'd put it on your eyes to be healed. In another example, the Roman historian Suetonius actually records a story where the Emperor Vespasian heals a man's sight with a salve that is made from his spit. In fact, there's an even more ancient text. It's called the Great Magical Papyrus of Paris, which, by the way, is a wonderful name for an ancient text. I like it when historians let loose a little bit here. But this text dates to potentially as early as 100 years before Jesus, and it calls for a magical salve to be placed on the recipient's eyes, not only to heal their eyes, but to open their spiritual acuity as well. So, is that what Jesus is doing? He's taking a page from the Great Magical Papyrus of Paris? Well, maybe, but probably more likely. What he's doing is responding to what this man was expecting when he asked for healing of his eyes. There's a cultural framework for this type of story. And Jesus responds by moving toward his frame of reference, what he expects. And what happens? Well, Jesus heals him a little bit. He starts to see, in part, kind of like the disciples do. But then Jesus touches him again and asks him again, and this time he sees clearly. You see, this whole story is all about the long, slow process of coming to see things for what they really are. In particular, it's about coming to see Jesus for who he really is. The one who moves toward us, the one who appears within the confines of our imaginative grid, the one who condescends to what we expect from him. All precisely so that he can slowly expand the walls of what we come to believe for ourselves. That's why this excursus into eye salves is actually really important to the story, because the blind man here is not just a prop so Jesus can make a point to his disciples. This man is on very much a parallel journey to the disciples. Jesus doesn't need magical salves, and he's not trying to embarrass this man by spitting on him. He's not even trying to be enigmatic or mysterious just for the sake of it. For my money, at least, what he's doing is exactly what this man expects him to do. He meets him where he is, and he moves him along toward the health that he wants for himself. That in itself is a kindness.
Hey, thanks for watching through. If you are intrigued by the work that we're doing here at Commons, then by all means, give us a like, throw a comment down below, and subscribe here so you can stay up to date on all of the content that we're posting here on YouTube. We'd also love to invite you to join our Discord. You can do that in the link down below. There's all kinds of conversations that we're inviting in and through the community as we do our best to follow Jesus together. Of course, you can find more about Commons at commons.church and following @Commons Church on all the socials. Thanks for being here.